The day Mom said, "I was banned from Thanksgiving." Her voice came over speakerphone like a verdict sharp. And echoing in the middle of my tiny kitchen, she said, "You're banned until you apologize." To your cousin, and someone in the background laughed a low, careless laugh like my hurt. Was entertainment a fork? Hit a plate. A chair scraped tile, and another voice joked, "She can eat leftovers in the garage," and in that moment, my stomach tightened because the garage meant I was no longer family, just a stray cat tolerated but not welcomed. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't beg. Instead, I breathed once steady and said, "Who do you think paid for the turkey and half those groceries?" For a moment, silence stretched, and I thought maybe they'd realize, maybe they'd hear the truth. Then a giggle broke. The quiet, a soft, cruel sound, and Mom's tone snapped sharp. "We don't need your little contributions. Learn some respect." Respect, that word stung, because for years I had been paying in silence. Phones kept connected, bills paid before due dates, groceries bought when cupboards were bare, and yet this was how they measured me, like I was disposable. I whispered more to myself than to them. "Okay, let's see what happens when I stop paying." My name is Olivia Grant. I'm 27. The quiet one in my family, the one who never caused a scene, but somehow always footed the bill. Not because I was rich, not because I wanted applause, but because I knew how to tame a spreadsheet, stretch a paycheck, and cover what others forgot. When Dad had surgery last year and insurance left gaps, I paid. The difference then, it was the family phone plan, then the internet, then Dylan's just until Friday rent. Every quiet yes built a floor for them to walk on. And while they laughed at my old car and small apartment, I became the invisible backbone they refused to see. That night, the family group chat lit up. Final head count for Thanksgiving. Names scrolled like a guest list to a party I had funded, but my name wasn't there. I typed, "Did you?" "Forget me," Dylan replied. "Limited seating. Try Christmas. If you behave like I was a child, not the one covering their bills." I stared at the dots pulsing, then called Mom. The phone picked up into clattering dishes and loud laughter. "You're not invited until you apologize to Dylan for ruining his promotion dinner," she said. "By ruining, you mean asking why he borrows rent money while bragging about sales?" I asked, Uncle Ray shouted. From the background, "There she goes again. Budget cop." My chest burned, but I kept my voice. "Lo, you want drama? Then stop using my debit card on auto pay." The slam of a receiver cut. The line minutes later, Aunt Patrice texted, "Don't make this about money. Family comes first," and on her feed, she posted a candlelit table, plates piled high. Everyone tagged. But me, I turned my phone face down on the couch, staring at the blank wall, feeling the weight of something I'd seen coming all year. It wasn't just this dinner, it was years of swallowing anger, years of buying my place in silence, years of being useful but never loved. The next morning, I opened my binder, the one no one knew about, a thick book of receipts, bills, logins, passwords, account numbers, everything I'd tracked for them over the years, because they couldn't be trusted to remember or care. Each page felt like a confession, each line a scar. Dad's hospital bill covered by my overtime. Dylan's rent covered by my credit card. Mom's utilities covered by my so-called little contributions. I stared at it and thought, this is my diary of invisibility. This is proof I was never respected, only used. So I pulled the binder closer and whispered, "Today it ends." I worked my shift that day at the insurance office, smiling at clients, pretending my stomach wasn't tight with grief. I nodded at papers stamped, claims denied, approved, routine, mechanical, when all I wanted was to scream at strangers that family should not feel like this. When I got home, the group chat was full of laughing emojis, selfies of Dylan holding a glass of wine. Mom's caption, "Family together, nothing better." I turned my phone off and sat in silence. In my little apartment where the rent was mine and the light was mine and the quiet belonged to no one else. I thought maybe loneliness is lighter than constant theft, maybe silence is safer than mockery. Thanksgiving morning. The smell of turkey and cinnamon rolls likely filled their house. I imagined the long table, golden lights, chairs, full laughter, echoing as if my name was never written there. I made myself oatmeal, ate. It slowly stared at the clock. When the phone buzzed, it was Grace, my mentor at work. Her text said, "How are you today?" Her timing was uncanny. Maybe she knew I'd been shrinking. I typed back, "Honest, I feel erased." She replied. You're not erased. You're just stepping out of the shadow of people who liked you small, and in that single line I felt something break loose. I spent that day not with family but with myself. I sorted clothes I didn't wear cleaned. Corners of the apartment I ignored, played music too loud, sang off key, and when the sun set I brewed tea, sat by the window and thought maybe this is the first real holiday I've had because it wasn't bought with my silence or my bank account. That night I dreamt of the garage, the plate of leftovers, a paper plate soggy with gravy left by the door, as if I were an animal, but in the dream I kicked the plate over and walked away, and when I woke I laughed because maybe that's what freedom looks like, messy but mine. Driving home after that dream, I realized how much weight I had been carrying for years, the kind of weight that doesn't show on a scale but shows in your shoulders, in the slump of your walk, in the way your laughter dies before it leaves your mouth. I drove through streets, still strung with orange autumn lights, leaves sticking wet to my windshield. And I thought maybe the loneliness I feared was better than the humiliation I had endured all these years. I parked in front of my building, sat in the car with the engine ticking its last warm notes, and whispered to myself, you're free even if it feels like exile. The days after Thanksgiving were quiet. The group chat kept moving without me, photos of leftovers, jokes about who burned the rolls, videos of Dylan's kids spilling juice, and everyone laughing like a commercial, but I stopped looking because each glimpse was another little cut, so I silenced the notifications, tucked the phone away, and listened instead to the hum of my fridge, the creak of pipes, the honest sounds of a life that belonged to me. Monday morning at work, Grace stopped by my desk. She leaned on the partition, her bracelets clinking softly. She said, you look different, lighter. I didn't know how to answer, so I just smiled and shrugged. She nodded like she understood and whispered, boundaries look good on you. That word boundaries rolled around in my chest like a stone. I wanted to hold. I realized I had never had them. Not really. I had said yes until my yes meant nothing. I had carried them until they believed the floor would hold itself up without me. December crept in, cold and bright, store windows glittering with promises, family photos plastered everywhere, commercials shouting togetherness, and yet I walked through it like a ghost. I bought my own small tree, a crooked little pine barely 4 feet tall, strung with white lights. I found on sale. I decorated it alone, humming under my breath, sipping cocoa, and for the first time the ritual was for me, not for them, not to prove I was enough, not to impress anyone, but because the glow made my apartment feel softer. The binder still sat on the table, thick, heavy, undeniable. Every night I stared at it, tempted to shred it, to burn it in some final ritual. But something held me back. It wasn't anger. It was proof that I had not imagined it. Proof that my generosity had been real, that my exhaustion was earned. So instead of destroying it, I wrote one last page. November 25th, refused entry to Thanksgiving banned until apology given. Groceries purchased, $170, unacknowledged contribution. Erased. I signed my name at the bottom like it was a contract, then closed it for good. A week before Christmas, the group chat pinged again. Head count for Christmas Eve. Dylan's name first. Patrice. Second, photos of dresses, decorations. No one asked if I was coming. No one invited me. Then the phone rang. It was Mom. Her voice less sharp. More careful, we're having Christmas dinner. She said there's a seat if you want it. I asked, is there also respect? Silence stretched across the line like a crack in glass. Finally, she said, we're trying. Her words didn't feel like victory, more like a truce. I said, I'll think about it, and hung up. Christmas Eve, I stayed home. I made pasta, lit a candle, played music I liked, and for once I didn't feel like I was missing something. I felt like I was gaining myself outside. Snow started to fall, soft and steady, blanketing the street. My window glowed with tree lights, and Christmas Day, they sent a group selfie. Everyone squeezed around the table, Dylan grinning wide, Mom holding a glass of wine, caption, family forever. I looked at it once, then deleted it. Because forever is only forever if it's built on honesty. New Year's Day came. I cleaned my apartment, threw out the old envelope where I used to tuck family receipts, the one that anchored me to their chaos. I made a new folder labeled plans. Inside, I wrote classes. I wanted to take a savings goal for a trip to the coast, a list that belonged to no one but me. I brewed coffee, sat by the window as fireworks crackled faint in the distance, and whispered, "Happy New Year, Olivia, you made it." Dad called later, his voice awkward like it hadn't. "Been in years," he said. "We set up the auto pay for the utilities." I smiled because he said, "We not you?" He paused, then added, "I'm sorry for making you feel like a purse." His words stumbled, but they were real. "Thank you," I said. "That helps." Dylan stayed silent. No texts, no calls, not until weeks later when my phone buzzed with his name message. I didn't know another message. "I'm sorry." I read them twice under the streetlight while walking home, snow crunching under my boots. I didn't reply. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because sometimes sorry comes too late sometimes. Silence is the only answer. February rolled in with gray skies, and I filled my days with things that asked nothing of me. I joined a yoga class on Saturday mornings, awkward and stiff. But laughing anyway, I bought a sketchbook and colored pencils and filled pages with messy shapes. I met Grace for coffee, and she asked, "How's your piece?" And I told her. It was steady like a candle flame. Not big, not dramatic, but enough to see by one evening. I passed the bakery where Aunt Patrice had once looked through me as if I were a problem. Not a person. I went inside, ordered an everything bagel toasted with cream cheese. The cashier smiled and asked anything else. I shook my head and walked out, biting into warm bread, and it tasted like something ordinary that owed me nothing. Sometimes I still checked. The group chat, sometimes the inside jokes stung. Sometimes I wondered if I was stubborn, but then I remembered the binder, the porch plate, the words I whispered in the kitchen. "I'm not your bank," and I knew I wasn't stubborn. I was whole. March brought daffodils, yellow blooms forcing their way through cracks in the median, tiny fists of color, shouting, "Survival." I stood at the bus stop watching them sway in the wind, and I thought maybe I'm like them, small but persistent, pushing up through cold ground. April brought rain. And Mom called again, not sharp, not demanding. "Just, Mom, we're having dinner," she said. "No occasion, no conditions, will you come?" I hesitated, then said maybe, and she sounded relieved. When the day came, I walked into her kitchen, the same kitchen that had once banished me. To the garage plate, she looked older, softer. Tired, she served pasta, simple, nothing fancy. And we ate in silence that wasn't heavy, just human. Every few minutes, she looked like she wanted to apologize again, but didn't, and I let the quiet heal us. When I left, she hugged me longer than usual, both of us aware of the cost, both willing to pay it. I don't know what next. Thanksgiving will be. Maybe I'll be at the table, maybe I'll be somewhere else drinking cocoa from a paper cup. But I know I won't be buying a seat with silence or money. I won't be the porch plate. I won't be the ghost auto pay. Their silence doesn't hurt anymore. It frees me. Spring unwrapped itself slowly like a cautious gift trees budding with shy. Green whispers air softer but still cool enough to keep your coat nearby. I walked through the park one Saturday morning watching children chase kites that tangled in branches, and I thought about all the things I had chased that were never really mine. The approval of people who called me budget cop, the laughter of cousins who never saw me as anything but a wallet. The fragile peace I kept buying with every yes I gave, when really what I wanted was simple, quiet belonging. I bought myself an ice cream cone, let it drip sticky down my wrist, and laughed softly alone, not because anyone told a joke, but because I realized joy can come in ordinary drips and messy moments. May came with longer days. My office grew busier. Quarterly reports piling up, but I found myself sharper, more focused without the constant drain of texts asking for quick loans or surprise bills. My bank account wasn't huge, but it was mine, every dollar sitting where I placed it like soldiers at attention. Grace noticed. She stopped by my desk again and said, "Your shoulders look lighter," I told her. I had started sleeping better. She grinned. "That's what happens when you're not carrying." Everyone else's midnight June brought invitations, weddings, barbecues, baby showers. Most I declined, not out of spite, but because I wanted to choose where I went, not where. I was guilted into. Mom called one afternoon, voice nervous. She said, "We're planning a small barbecue, just family. Would you come?" I asked, "Whose definition of family, yours or mine?" She was quiet, then said, "I mean, whoever wants to be there, no conditions, no apologies required." I hesitated, but agreed. When the day came, I walked into the backyard, smell of charcoal and lighter fluid thick in the air, kids running with water balloons, dogs barking, chairs scattered around. Dad sat with a beer looking smaller than I remembered. Mom flipped. Burgers at the grill. Dylan leaned against the fence, scrolling his phone. His girlfriend. Beside him, no one mentioned the binder. No one mentioned the money, but something was. Different conversations, careful, softer. I sat at the picnic table. Mom set a plate. In front of me, burger chips, a little salad, like it was normal, like nothing had broken last. Winter Dylan finally looked up, said, "Hey, thanks for coming." His words flat, awkward, but maybe a start. I nodded and ate. The silence was awkward, but not cruel, it felt like. A house being rebuilt one brick at a time. Later that night when I drove home, I realized I didn't ache the way I used. To the porch plate, memories still stung, but less like an open wound, more like a scar. Summer stretched, long hot days, cicadas buzzing like power lines I spent weekends at. The library, reading travel books, planning a trip. I promised myself maybe Italy, maybe. Just a road trip to the coast, it didn't matter. The point was, it was for me. I stopped. Checking the family chat as often, muted it until it felt like background noise one evening. Grace invited me to her place, her living room cluttered with plants, books stacked in towers. She poured wine and asked, "What do you want next?" Not what they need from you. What do you want? The question startled me. I said, "I want to know who I am when I'm not saving everyone." She smiled. "Then you're about to find out." August arrived, thick with heat. Dylan called. For the first time in months, his voice uncertain. He said, "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." Again, I didn't understand how much you carried. I let the silence stretch until he added, "I'm trying to do better." I didn't answer with forgiveness, not yet, but I said, "I hear you." Maybe that was enough, maybe not. September, but I said, "I hear you." Maybe that was enough, maybe not. September rolled around with cooler winds, and golden light. One Sunday, Mom invited me to dinner again. I went. She had cooked chicken, potatoes, simple food. We sat in quiet comfort. She looked up halfway through the meal and said, "I know I can't erase what happened, but I don't want to lose you." I took a breath, looked at her tired eyes and said, "Then stop pretending it never happened." She nodded, tears threatening, but she didn't argue. Progress comes slow, like rivers carving stone. October brought Halloween decorations, children in costumes running through the streets. I carved a pumpkin for the first time in years, lit a candle inside and set it on my windowsill. The glow made me smile. Thanksgiving loomed on the horizon. The holiday that had once shut me out now stood like a question mark. Mom called early in November. "We'd like you to come this year," she said, her voice soft. "Will you?" I asked, "Am I a guest or family?" She hesitated, then said, "Family, if you." "I'll have us too." The words caught me off guard. I whispered, "I'll think about it." The week before Thanksgiving, the group chat buzzed with plans, shopping lists, cooking assignments. This time, my name appeared. Olivia, dessert duty. I stared at it for a long time, not sure how. I felt part of me bristled at being assigned like old times, but another part softened maybe. They were trying. I decided to bring a pie store-bought, not fancy, not a sacrifice, just enough. Thanksgiving Day, I drove over, pie on the seat, heart thumping. When I walked in, the house smelled like cinnamon and turkey. Laughter spilled from the kitchen. Dylan looked up from carving the turkey and said, "Hey, Liv, want a slice?" Mom hugged me quick, awkward, but real. Dad clapped my shoulder. We sat at the table, names called, plates filled this time. My name was there, not missing, not erased. I didn't feel fully safe, not yet, but I felt seen halfway through dinner. Mom lifted her glass, said, "I'm grateful for second chances." She glanced at me, eyes shining. I nodded, didn't speak, but inside something unknotted. Later, when I drove home, I realized it wasn't about one meal or one holiday. It was about me choosing not to pay for my place anymore, me choosing to stay or go because I wanted to, not because I feared exile. The binder still sat on my shelf, but now it felt less like a weapon, more like a story, a reminder of the girl who carried too much and the woman who finally put it down. When I lit my tree that December, I whispered to myself, "You're not their bank. You're not their porch plate. You're Olivia, and you belong to yourself." And the lights glowed steady like they agreed. Winter settled, heavy snow coating roofs like quiet, secret sidewalks slick under dim streetlights. I woke each morning to the hum of my heater and the glow of my small tree, a kind of peace I had once thought impossible. January rolled on, slow and steady, work deadlines passing. In tidy rows, my savings account growing like a plant watered carefully each paycheck. Grace asked one afternoon, "So what's next?" I thought for a while, then said, "I want to take a trip. I want to see the ocean." She grinned. "Then book it. Don't wait for permission." February. I drove to the coast. Cold gray waves crashing against jagged rocks, gulls wheeling. Overhead, I stood on the sand boots, sinking slightly salty air stinging my cheeks, and realized I was breathing deeper than I had in years. I whispered to the waves, "I'm free." The sound swallowed by surf, but real enough for me. When I came back, Mom called again, her voice small. She said, "I miss you. I miss the way you used to laugh." I didn't know what to say, so I let silence carry the weight until she added, "I'm learning, I believed." Her not fully, but enough. Spring came back with green shoots and birdsong my apartment, window filled with light earlier each morning. One Saturday I opened the binder again. Not to wallow, but to remember each page, each receipt, each date proof of the years I gave. Proof of the woman I had become stronger, not harder, just clearer. I slid it back onto the shelf, labeled it not debt, but lesson in April. Dad called asking how to set up online payments. For his own accounts, I walked him through slowly. He wrote each step down, his voice steady. This time not helpless. When he finished, he said, "Thanks, Liv. I should have learned this years ago." I smiled and said, "Better now than never." In May, Dylan sent a single text, "Just paid. Off my car, thought you'd like to know." I stared at it long, unsure if it was bragging or progress, but then he added, "With my own money this time." I exhaled. Maybe he was learning too. June rolled into warm evenings, fireflies blinking like tiny signals. In the dark, Mom invited me for dinner again this time. No hidden edge, just pasta salad. Conversation about the weather. She handed me a recipe card, her handwriting. Shaky said, "I thought you'd like this casserole." I took it, folded it into my purse. Not because I needed it, but because maybe it was her way of saying thank you without words. July, I finally booked the trip, a week in Italy. Tickets printed, tucked into a folder labeled plans, the same folder where once I had written down everyone else's. As debts, now it held only mine, a future shaped by choice, not obligation. August heat swelled, but I didn't feel weighed down. I joined a cooking class, laughed when my pasta collapsed into a lump, made friends who knew me not as the family bank, but as Olivia, the one who cracked jokes when flour dusted her nose. September, my birthday rolled around. Mom called, asked if she could come by. She brought a small cake, chocolate, my favorite. She sat on my couch, looking at the crooked little tree I hadn't taken down since last winter. She said, "I'm sorry again." Softer than before, I nodded. Maybe forgiveness doesn't come in one sweeping moment. Maybe it comes in small offerings like cake and recipes. October, leaves turned crisp gold. I went to the bakery again, the cashier remembered. Me smiled and said the usual. I laughed, ordered my bagel, and realized how far I'd come from the day Aunt Patrice had waved me forward like a warning label. November, Thanksgiving loomed again. Invitations floated in this time. Mine came first. Mom called. "We'd love you here, we'll make room." Dylan even offered to bring dessert himself. I thought about last year, the porch plate, the silence, the binder. Then I thought about now, my own savings, my book trip, my steady peace. I whispered to myself, "You don't owe them anything, but you can choose if you want." So I said, "I'll come Thanksgiving morning." I drove over, pie on the seat like before, but this time my chest didn't burn. With fear, I walked in, laughter already spilling. But this time it paused when I entered. Not in shock, but in welcome. Dylan nodded. Dad hugged me. Mom handed me a mug of cider. Said, "We're grateful you're here," her eyes wet. Dinner was loud, messy, imperfect. But this time my name was at the table, not erased, not hidden. When Mom lifted her glass, she said, "Gratitude for growth, for second chances for Olivia." I felt heat in my eyes, but I didn't cry. I just nodded, because maybe this was enough later. That night I drove home, pie crumbs on the passenger seat, and thought the real Thanksgiving wasn't at their table, it was inside me, the choice to be whole, not hollow. December lights filled the streets again. I sat by my tree, cocoa steaming, and opened my new folder labeled plans. Inside, tickets, notes, dreams, not debts. I whispered. No is a complete sentence, yes is a choice, and both belong to me outside. Snow drifted down soft and sure like a promise. I didn't need their approval.